My name is Zoe Marsh and I am 29 years old. For 3 years, I designed everything at Calloway Creative, every brand identity, every campaign, every pitch deck that won a client, and every visual system that kept them. I did it from a monitor the agency supplied, in an open-plan office that smelled like cold brew and ambition, for $2,800 a month. I thought that was the deal. Junior designer, learning the industry, building her book. I thought the arrangement was fair because I didn't know what the arrangement actually was. The email that changed everything came on a Thursday afternoon in March. It was addressed directly to me, not forwarded, not CC'd, not a group thread. Directly to me, from a client named Harriet Voss at a fintech company called Blue Ground. She wrote, "Zoe, I hope it's okay to reach out directly. I have a new project and, honestly, I'd love to work with whoever actually made the Blue Ground brand. That work was exceptional. Is that you?" I stared at that email for a long time. Because Harriet Voss was paying Calloway Creative $8,000 a month for a retainer that my boss, Derek Calloway, had pitched, won, and managed. A retainer I had never been told the value of. A retainer for which I had designed every single deliverable for 14 months, and for which I had been paid my flat $2,800, same as always, no bonus, no commission, no acknowledgement beyond Derek forwarding client praise with a simple, "Great work this week," as though the compliment were his to redistribute. I replied to Harriet. I kept it professional and warm. I told her I was glad the work landed well and that I would love to connect. Then I closed my laptop. I went to the bathroom. I stood at the sink and I did the math. $8,000 a month. 14 months. $112,000 billed to one client alone. For my work. And Derek had given me $2,800 a month and called it an opportunity. I went back to my desk. I opened a new document on my personal laptop, not the agency machine, mine, and I titled it one word. Inventory. Before I tell you what I put in that document and what I did with it over the next 3 months, take a second and tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it? I always want to know who's on the other end of these stories. Hit that subscribe button before we keep going because what I built in those 3 months is the part that changes everything. Now let me take you back to how Derek Calloway worked because you need to understand the machine before you understand how I dismantled it. Derek was 43 when I joined Calloway Creative fresh out of a design program in Austin. He was the kind of man who wore his creative director title like a physical garment, present in every room, positioned in every conversation. He spoke about design with the fluency of someone who had been absorbing other people's thinking for decades and had become genuinely, impressively articulate about it. He could talk about kerning and brand tension and visual hierarchy for an hour in a client meeting and sound exactly like the creative genius in the room. He just couldn't make anything. I didn't understand that immediately. In the beginning, I thought the dynamic was normal, senior creative directing, junior creative executing. He would brief me, I would build, he would present. That's how agencies work. I had no reason to question the structure. The first crack came about 8 months in. I had been working on a rebrand for a mid-size logistics company, 6 weeks of work, 3 rounds of revisions, a full visual identity system I was genuinely proud of. At the presentation, Derek walked the client through every slide. He used phrases like what I was going for here and my thinking on the color language and the way I approached the typographic system. I sat to his left and said nothing because that was my role and I believed in the role. The client signed a 12-month contract the following week. Derek sent me a Slack message that said, "Crushed it. Great execution as always. Great execution. Not great design. Not great work. Great execution," as though I were a printer that had successfully reproduced someone else's vision. I filed it away and kept working because I was 26 and I needed the job and I believed that visibility would come with time. That Derek would eventually introduce me to clients. That credit would accumulate naturally. It did not accumulate naturally. What accumulated was Derek's reputation, built piece by piece from my portfolio, presented to every new client as evidence of his creative leadership. His agency website had case studies for every project I had ever worked on. Not one of them mentioned my name. I know this because I checked. After Harriet's email, I went through the entire site. 6 case studies. 6 projects I had designed end to end. His name, his agency, his vision. My work, invisible. I opened the inventory document and I started listing them. The document grew quickly because once I started looking, I could not stop. I pulled invoices I had access to through the agency's project management software, rates I had never been told, billed hours I had never been shown. I cross-referenced what I could find against my own timesheets, my own deliverables, my own email threads where clients had responded directly to work I had sent. What I found was a business model so clean and so consistent that it could only have been intentional. Derek billed clients between $6,000 and $12,000 a month, depending on scope. He employed 2 designers, me and a part-timer named Leon who handled production work. Between us, we produced everything. Derek produced the pitches, the relationships, and the invoices. He understood, with the precision of someone who had refined this for years, that creative work is invisible when the person presenting it is charismatic enough to fill the room. He had been filling rooms for a long time. I had been filling rooms for him for 3 years. Around week 3 of quietly building the inventory, I made an appointment with a woman named Carmen Delgado. A friend from my program had used her when she left an agency under difficult circumstances and had described her as someone who did not waste words. Carmen was an employment and contracts attorney. She had a small office near downtown, plants on every surface, and the particular quality of someone who has heard every version of the story and knows exactly which details matter. I sat across from her and I showed her what I had. The email from Harriet, the case studies, the billing rates I had found, my employment contract, which I had brought because Carmen had asked for it specifically. She read the contract for 4 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up and said, "Your contract assigns work product to the agency. That's standard and that's going to stand. But it doesn't give him the right to misrepresent authorship to clients. And it definitely doesn't prevent you from leaving and taking relationships with you, as long as you're careful about how you do it." She paused. The clients don't belong to Derek. They belong to whoever they want to work with. And from that email, it sounds like at least one of them already knows who that is. I asked her what careful looked like. She told me. I wrote down every word. Here is what careful looked like in practice. I did not quit. I did not confront Derek. I did not change anything visible about my day at Calloway Creative. I kept designing. I kept executing. I kept saying thanks when Derek forwarded client praise and kept my expression neutral in every meeting. What I did outside of those hours was build. I registered my own LLC, Marsh Studio. I built a website quietly on a domain Derek had no connection to, and I populated it with the work I had the legal right to show. Personal projects, spec work, freelance pieces I had done before joining Calloway. Enough to demonstrate the quality. Enough that someone looking at it would understand immediately what kind of designer I was. I replied to Harriet Voss. I told her I was exploring some things and would love to grab coffee when the timing was right. She said anytime. I did not rush it. I started making a list carefully with Carmen's guidance of every client I had a genuine relationship with. Not clients Derek had managed. Clients who had emailed me directly. Clients who had asked for me by name in briefs. Clients whose work I had led so completely that their point of contact, in practice, was me. There were 7 of them. I did not contact any of them. Not yet. Carmen had been very clear about the sequence. And then, at the beginning of month 2, something happened that I had not planned for. Derek landed a new client. A big one, a wellness brand with a national launch coming up, a budget that made everything before it look small. He came into the office on a Monday morning visibly energized in the way that only new money produces. He briefed me for 40 minutes. He told me this was the project that would take the agency to the next level. He told me he needed my best work. He said, "This one's going to make careers, Zoe. I want you locked in." I told him I was locked in. That afternoon I called Carmen and told her about the new client. There was a pause on her end. Then she said, "How long until you'd have enough of your own infrastructure in place to leave?" I said 6 weeks. She said, "Then I'd start making some coffee appointments." The first coffee was with Harriet Voss. We met on a Tuesday morning at a place near her office that she suggested. She was direct in the way that people who run finance companies are direct, no warm-up, no small talk, straight to it. She asked me what I was building. I told her. I told her about Marsh Studio, about what I was offering, about the kind of work I wanted to do and the kind of relationships I wanted to have with clients, direct, transparent, fully credited. She looked at me across the table and said, "What's your rate?" I told her. She said, "That's less than we're paying now." I told her I was aware of what Calloway Creative built. I did not say anything else about Derek. I did not need to. Harriet signed a letter of intent with Marsh Studio 2 weeks later. Over the following 4 weeks, I had 5 more conversations. Some were quick, a single email exchange with a client who had been waiting for a reason to simplify their vendor list. Some took 2 meetings. One took 3, because the client had a long relationship with Derek personally and needed time. But one by one, quietly, professionally, and without a single disparaging word about Calloway Creative, I built my client list. 6 clients. 5 confirmed before I resigned. 1 committed in principle with a contract to follow. On the morning of Derek's big wellness brand kickoff, the meeting he had spent 6 weeks building toward, the one he had told me would make careers, I arrived at the office at my usual time. I made coffee. I sat at my desk. At 9 o'clock, 45 minutes before the client was due to arrive, I walked into Derek's office and I handed him a printed letter. 1 page. My resignation, effective immediately. Clean, professional, no explanation beyond what was legally required. Derek read it. He looked up. His face moved through several expressions, quickly confusion, then the particular alarm of a man who has just understood that something he considered fixed is no longer in place. He said, "You can't do this today. We have the halcyon kickoff in 45 minutes. I said, "I know. I'm sorry for the timing." He said, "Zoe, I need you in that meeting. We'll talk about a raise. Whatever you need, we can figure this out." I said, "I appreciate that. I've already made my decision." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm opening my own studio." The silence that followed was the specific silence of a man calculating what he stands to lose and arriving at a number larger than he expected. I thanked him for the 3 years. I meant it partially. I had learned things, I had grown, I had built a body of work inside his agency that was now fully mine in every way that mattered. I collected my personal items, which I had quietly moved to my bag over the previous week so that nothing about my departure looked prepared. Then I walked out. The halcyon kickoff meeting happened without a creative director who could design anything. I don't know exactly how it went. What I know is that Halcyon did not become a long-term Calloway client. What I know is that within 30 days of my resignation, 3 of the remaining clients Derek had not been contacted by found reasons to reconsider their retainers. And what I know is that Marsh Studio opened its first month with 6 clients, a website, an LLC, and a rate sheet that finally, accurately reflected the value of the work. 12 months later, Marsh Studio has 9 clients. The average monthly retainer is $4,600. I have one contractor I bring in for production work on large projects, and I am in conversations with a second designer who would be a partner, not an employee, a partner with full credit and a percentage of everything she touches. I know what that distinction means now in a way I didn't when I was 26. Carmen still gets a Christmas card from me every year. She told me, at our last meeting, that my case was one of her cleaner ones not because the situation wasn't serious, but because I had done everything in the right sequence. No emotional decisions. No premature confrontations. No burning of bridges that I might need later. She said, "You treated it like a project. That's why it worked." She was right. I did treat it like a project. I gave it a name, I built a timeline, I identified the deliverables, I managed the risks, and I shipped it on deadline. Just like I had done with every piece of work I had ever made for a man who put his name on it. The difference was that this time the deliverable had my name on it. Derek still runs Calloway Creative. The agency is smaller now. I've heard things through the design community, the way you hear things in a creative industry where everyone eventually ends up in the same rooms. I don't follow his career closely. I have my own career to follow, and it takes up considerably more of my attention than it used to. If you are watching this and you are a designer, a writer, a developer, a creative of any kind who has ever sat in a meeting and watched someone else present your work and felt that specific compound helplessness of knowing something is wrong but not yet knowing what to do about it, I want you to hear this. You are not powerless. You are not stuck. And the person who benefits most from you believing you are powerless is the person currently holding your work above their head and calling it vision. Know your contracts. Know your client relationships. Know what you have built and who has actually experienced it. And when the time comes, and it will come, be patient enough to build something solid before you walk out the door. Because walking out without a plan is just quitting. Walking out with 6 clients and an LLC is a launch. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever watched someone take credit for your work and said nothing because you didn't know what else to do? What was the moment you finally decided enough? I read every single one. And if this story hit somewhere real, subscribe to this channel. Every week there is another story like this one. Women who were underestimated, underpaid, overlooked, and invisible until they decided not to be. Women who planned quietly and moved precisely and built something the people who underestimated them still haven't fully understood. Your work has your name on it, even when someone else's name is on the cover. We'll be here every week to remind you of that. Subscribe. And I'll see you next time.